Okay. Thought I'd do a sort of live Q&A on how to move to Iceland, just because I remember when I moved here, there was a lot of paperwork and it was a lot of unknown, and a lot of the information that they have is very hard to sort of figure out, especially if you're coming from somewhere outside of Europe. So I thought I would go over all the information for any of those that want to move to Iceland. Okay, so I think we should get started here. So this page here is the immigration office website, and this is where all of the information is. As you can see, it's in Icelandic, but very easily you can go to the top right and there's a little English icon, so you can switch to English, make it a bit easier. Now, that website doesn't update necessarily really quickly, but it should give you all the information that you need in terms of visiting Iceland if you require visas or residence permits, asylum, international protection, or Icelandic citizenship. Now, the citizenship, all of the information for this is mostly in Icelandic, because for citizenship you do need to undergo an Icelandic evaluation test in order to basically prove that you know enough Icelandic to fit into the rest of the country. So what I wanted to go through first is the residence permits, just because that's where most people, if you are looking to move to Iceland, this is the area that you're going to want to investigate more. So if we look at the residence permits, there's a huge amount of information and categories that you can get or sort of go through in terms of what you need. You can see the long list of the different types and regulations on the left-hand side, and then all the information that will pertain to the category that you selected will be in this center part. So for me, I came here on a specialist visa, but there's a whole bunch of different visa and permits that you can go through in terms of what you would need. The one that I think a lot of people look for is the student visa. So there is a student visa, but the weird thing about Iceland is that there's two different permits that you need. You need a work permit as well as you need a residence permit, and it's two different applications that you need to fill out in order to get both of them approved, and then you can come to Iceland. It's very strange the way that they've set it up, and hopefully one day that they will consolidate the process. You submit all the information to the same organization, so this UTL, but the fact is that you do need to do two different applications. So most people, my guess is that you would be looking at the permits based on work. So if we click on that, you can see here there's only a couple of different categories that you can fall into. Iceland doesn't let people come here from outside of Europe for a work visa for jobs like bartender or anything like that. The basic rule is the company that's wishing to sponsor you for the visa will have to potentially prove that they could not get any Icelandic person to fill the job based on the jobs that they posted, as well as that they cannot get anyone from the rest of Europe, because the first person eligible for the job would be the people in Iceland, and then after that it would be people inside of Europe, and then after that is everyone else. So there could be a case where the government organization here asks the company for proof that they are both not able to find someone inside of Iceland to fill the job, and that they're not able to find anyone within Europe that wants to come and do the job as well. So it's very difficult. If you're not young enough to student, we'll look at some of the student stuff, but basically if you're younger and you want to move here and you're under 18 or something like that, I believe that you would have to look at sort of moving with a parent. I don't think there's any case where a minor will be able to move here on their own. So looking at the permits based on work, they have a lot of regulations, and you can take a look They have this Foreign Nationals Act, and that basically is the law that's in place for all of this. If you click on it, you can go through and you can read this huge amount of information that's pertained inside of this legislation. But for the most part, you don't need to go through all of this. You can just look straight at the information on the UTL page. So here we go. There's a lot of information to cover. So the residence permits that are based on work, the one, as I said, I got was the for work requiring expert knowledge. So we'll start there. And we can see, let me zoom in so it's a bit easier for everyone here. So you can see here that it says that the expert knowledge of the applicant must be essential to the enterprise involved and must consist of university level education, but there is some leeway. So unfortunately, if you only have your high school, it is just not enough to move here for this particular visa. In terms of how long you're allowed to go on a holiday without a residence, so if you're outside of Europe, you can come to Iceland. I believe it's for 90 days on the visa, and that's within all of Europe. So you can stay in all of Europe for up to 90 days, I believe, for every year. And then you have to leave for, I think it's 1 month, and then they sort of reset the clock. The UK is classified as a third country now, yeah, unfortunately. So that this would apply to everyone inside of the UK as well. So the rights attached to the permit is that if you don't need a visa to visit Iceland, you can be in Iceland while they're processing your application. When I got mine, I wasn't allowed to come to Iceland and be here while they were processing it, so I had to sort of just wait and hope to get it. So the residence permit might be granted for up to 2 years, but it is, as I said, because you're having a residence permit and a work permit, they coincide, and the maximum they'll give you is 2 years at a time. The weird thing about this is, and well, maybe it's the same in many other countries. This is the only other country I've moved to, but you are not allowed to work for any employer other than the one that your permit is attached to. Which means that if you move here and you want to stay and live in Iceland and you want to get a permanent residence permit, then you have to have the same job for 4 years, or you have to submit for another work permit for a different company and hope that that gets approved. So if you lose your job, they give you a little bit of time to try and find another one. They don't just kick you out right away. But it is very difficult because it's a long process in order to submit the application for these work permits. For me, it took the job I came to, I believe it was about 6 months from when they wanted to hire me to when we got the approval for me to come to Iceland and the work permit and residence permit was granted. So it's a long time, and the difficulty with this in terms of the way they've set it up, so it's hard enough to find a job that wants to help you relocate to Iceland. It's even more difficult to find a job that wants to wait 6 months before you start or longer. So, yeah, and even when you have all the information submitted, you can't start working until the permits have been granted. As I said, you can't work for anyone else. It has to be on the actual work visa card or the resident permit card that they give you. It lists the ID number of the company that you're attached to. So it's 100% that like this is the reason that you're here, is just this one company. And then the other thing too is when you have the residence and work permit, you can't stay in a country longer than 3 months. So you can't be outside of Iceland for longer than 3 months for every 12-month period. Otherwise, they could just cancel it, which makes sense. I mean, they want most of your time to be spent in Iceland. So that's for the specialist work permits, and you have a lot of rights to that, and we'll take a look at some of the rights on that in terms of bringing your family with you if you have one. So this shortage of workers, it's one of those things where there's a lot of leeway in terms of what would constitute the shortage of worker, and maybe that falls also into the specialist role if they can't find the amount of people. They do allow this type of visa, particularly in the tourism industry, because there is a lot of people that come to Iceland to work in tourism. I mean, obviously not last year, but maybe when this sort of everything blows over and tourism restarts, this could be an option if you're looking to go here. And if you have expertise in the tourism sector, there are official courses that you need to take to become a tour guide in Iceland. So there's a little bit of a thing in terms of you can't just come here and just say, oh yeah, I'm good at, conducting tours. It's an actual designated job. A lot of the same rights. This one here, for the shortage of workers, they only grant it for up to 1 year at a time and just renew it every single year. Athletes, actors, and things like that, they have different specialists that go through these applications. And it makes sense, if someone comes here to train and then they want to make it easy for athletes to come here. So someone here who, the Icelandic football team or soccer team wants to bring in, then they can use this particular method. And then there's things like qualified professionals based on collaboration and service contracts. And these things are usually in terms of the sciences and educational sector. So it's, as it says here, collaboration agreement for educational, scholarly, or scientific work. So if you are working for, say, a university in a different country, and the University of Iceland or Reykjavik University wants to bring you in for a semester, or, then they are able to do that. This one here they get shorter and shorter. This is not usually granted for longer than 6 months. And it's again based on a contract. The thing with this particular visa and residence permit is that you're not allowed to bring your family with you, and is not the basis for a permanent residence permit. So there's all that. There's a ton of stuff in terms of what you need for the first permit. Before we go into this, let's look at the student application. I think there's a need in the healthcare field worldwide right now. So if you're working in the health industry, that is definitely somewhere to investigate. I can pull up some of the job site websites that are here in Iceland, and you can take a look at that. Now, most of the postings are in Icelandic, but if you're qualified in the medical field, I think it's a safe bet that it would be a welcome addition, perhaps. So for the residence permit for students, they do have deadlines for when you need to submit all of your applications. And you can see here that it's June 1st for the fall semester, and then the spring semester is November 1st. And that's just to give them enough time to process the application and get it in before the studies start. Now, someone was asking earlier about if you're not old enough to go to school. A lot of these permits you have to be older than 18. So it's just technically an adult in the eyes of the government. And I think that's a lot of places have this same sort of rule. You have to be enrolled in a full study at an Icelandic university in one of the levels, the BA, master, or doctorate. And it's one of those things where you apply, you get in, and then you send all the information to UTL, which is the immigration office. You do need to get insurance. I mean, that is something that we'll go over in a second, as well as you do need to be able to provide that you have money to bring. In terms of self-employment, I'll go over one thing that they changed recently, and it does allow self-employed people to come here for a longer period of time and work remotely. So we'll look at that. The amount of money that you need in order to be earning to be able to come here as self-employed is quite high for a lot of people, but yeah, we'll get in that in just a minute. And then there's a lot of things. General on these visas is that you shouldn't have a criminal record and things like that. So with the student visa, again, the work permit is separate, and you have to apply for a work permit if you want to work. And it's, again, if you're a student, you have to have just one job that you can go to. But as a student visa, you can't work more than 15 hours per week. So it's an important thing to consider, because that means that you need to have a lot of money with you to support yourself, because 15 hours a week isn't a huge amount of time. I know when I was in school, I was working, 30-ish hours a week, and I still felt broke. It's like these part-time jobs, working minimum wage. So let's take a look at here. And then it's just sort of further information on how it is. And the residence permit, again, it's renewed 1 year at a time. And there's some stuff about, if for the first renewal, an applicant's study results are considered satisfactory if he or she has completed at least a total of 75% of full study during the year. So you have to be going to school. You can't just get this and then not go to school. The grades have to be there as well. And then there's a lot of information in terms of that, and then applicant details on actually filling out the application. So let's go into some of the other ones here. We have a long-term visa. Everyone loves Iceland. Although I will say it's I feel like it's one of those things where everyone thinks the grass is greener on the other side, and very quickly, I moved here on I think it was a Friday. So I landed on a Friday morning, and then I was working full-time on a Monday. So I didn't have a lot of time to explore the country. And I moved at the beginning of January as well, so it was really dark. The novelty of Iceland, don't get me wrong, Iceland's a very beautiful country, but it becomes just somewhere that you live fairly quickly. And to sort of the comment on the locals, you may find it difficult to get to know and befriend a lot of native Icelandic people. I got pretty lucky because I was the only foreign person in the jobs that I've had so far. So I have a mixture of Icelandic friends as well as friends from various parts of the world. But yeah, it takes a little bit of getting used to, because Icelandic people are a little bit closer because they have grown up. Some of them have been best friends since preschool, and so you would be this outsider coming into the group kind of thing. So in terms of the long-term visas, this is something that if you want to stay in Iceland beyond 90 days, rather than, as I said, the default visa is 90 days within Europe, and you can look through here to get it extended for whatever reason. Someone was mentioning British citizens, and there's a lot of information on people who want to come into Iceland who are from the UK and who want to move. And basically, you can read through all this, but you are looking at the same process as, say, someone that's from the United States. So it's an important thing to look through all this. Again, it's utl.com, has all the information. So if we look now at the general, there's a ton of stuff. We'll go through permanent residence in a minute. But we can take a look at the application process. As I said, it takes a long time. There's a lot of tradesmen in Iceland, but again, everything is through qualifications. So, master electrician and things like that. So on submitting the application, there's a lot of application forms, and there's some general information about the permits, but first time applicants, as I said, could take up to 180 days. Mine took 6 months, so it was a long, long time. And then by the time they approved it, it was late November, and I, with the work that was hiring me, we just decided to just wait until after Christmas before I moved. So, and then renewals are usually 90 days, but I find every time I've had to deal with UTL, most of the time they use basically the full time. There's never a case where I have had to renew previously and it was in a month. It was always very, very close, if not like the last day that they had to do this. Now I have friends going for citizenship, and citizenship, they say it's going to be 1 year, and he's been waiting, I think it's just over a year and a half now. So these are just sort of guidelines. And yeah. So in terms of getting the actual first permit, there's a lot of stuff that you need. So if we look at let's look at the permits for based on work, because it has a lot of the information. Oh, I keep clicking on the wrong one. There we go. So if we look down here to the general application for the first permit, and this basically applies for everyone. So the documents that you need to be submitted are all listed here, and it goes to 9, and then possibly some more as well. In terms of the 9, you need a payment, and that's through your bank. And if we look at the processing fees, you can see here that the application for a residence permit is 15,000 Icelandic kroner, which I think that's just over $120 US. I'm not sure how it is in euros, but yeah, it's I think it's around between $100 and $130 US, depending on the exchange. Renewal is the same thing. And then if the place that you're working wants to get this, expedited, they can pay another $400 on top of it to get that going. So the nice thing is you don't need to pay for both the work permit and the residence permit. It's just one payment covers both of it. So if we go back to the permits based on work, so you have to go to the bank and you have to pay that. Non-refundable, of course, they just want the money. The application for a residence permit. So if we look here, and let me just switch. There we go. Thankfully, the information is in English, so it's not too difficult to fill out in terms of this one. It used to be that these application forms were only in Icelandic, and that made it very, very difficult if you didn't have someone helping you to actually fill out the forms. But this is pretty easy now. And you can see here, you just check the permit that you're applying for, expert knowledge. And then you scroll down, there's a lot of information. Obviously, don't fill out this area because that's just for them. So it's 100 euros roughly for the fee. And then all of the rights that are attached to the permit for the various types. And then you just say, yep, first resident permit, and you want the validity being from this time to this time. And again, depending on the permit that you're going for, just put it to the max. So if it's 2 years, put in 2 years, unless your work contract is less. So just put it in as much as you can so you don't have to keep renewing every year should you want to stay longer. And then you just fill out your name. And that's it. You can get someone to complete the forms for you, and I'll go over that too. You can get a power of attorney, or as I said, if you have someone, your workplace hiring you, most likely they may have gone through this process before and can help you with actually filling out the forms. But it's just the regular stuff here, your name, marital status, place of birth, things like that, address. The information that they'll need as well is your passport information, when it expires, if you need visas to visit, Europe or even Iceland, and where you've lived over the last 5 years. So that's every country. When you're planning on moving, if you are already in Iceland, so again, you can stay in Iceland while they're processing the forms. But remember, for people from North America, you have 90 days that you can stay in Iceland, and it could take a lot longer, up to 180 days for them to grant this. So it's one of those things where you may be in Iceland, perhaps you have to ask for a extended, visitor visa while this is being processed, if you want to stay the whole time. And then just information on when you've been to Iceland before, sort of thing. Then we get into any spouse or cohabiting partners and children, if you're bringing your children along. information on your parents, your language skills, and your educational levels. And they want everything from, it's very strange, but they want even like primary schools all the way to university. And then your highest education level, where have you stayed abroad over the last, where you stayed. If you're renewing, they want to know where you've been during, when you came to Iceland until your renewal time. So if you've already been in Iceland for a year on a visa or a work visa, and you go, say, back to your home country or a different country to visit, you just have to list every single one of those places that you've left Iceland and went, and why you were there. Any fines or imprisonments, you have to put that in. And then, just more stuff on the police. And then here, someone was asking if you need to fill it out yourself. You don't have to. You can have a representative, and you can authorize someone to be the contact point for this information. Otherwise, they won't give any information to anyone else except for the applicant unless you fill this out. And there's all the information here for that. And then, of course, the processing fee and a checklist. So this is something you print out. They do want you to actually check all of these boxes. And we'll go through each of these right now. And then the rest of it is just information. So in terms of what you need, I know I went through it pretty quick, but I mean, it's just a form. It's probably pretty boring to go through it step by step. But the checklist is important because there's a lot of things in here that you need to know. And there's some things that are not necessarily something that you need to get. So the payment, 100% you need to have that sent from your bank to UTL, and they have payment information and how to pay it on their website on the fees page. The application for a residence permit, so it's this application that we're looking at now. You need a passport photo, which is pretty easy to get. Photocopies of the personal information page and signature page of your passport. I believe that's usually on page 2 on everyone's passport. So you need that. And it has to be notarized as well. So that's another important thing that they don't actually say here. And I don't think that they say it here. No, so they don't say it. It does have to be notarized. You can't just print something out on your own. Every time that I've had to renew, they wanted themselves either to do the photocopies of my passport or for me to take it and get it notarized to confirm that it was the original copy. A original criminal record certificate is important. They do want that. So if you're from the States, I think it's the FBI that you would go through. Canada, it's the RCMP, and then various countries in Europe. I'm sure you have the various ways that you can get a criminal record certificate. And so that has to be everywhere that you've lived. So if you're jumping from country to country, it's going to be a few that you're going to need to get. So it's all the countries that you've lived in the last 5 years, and the certificate can't be older than 6 months. So they need that. If the languages of any of these documents are not in English or Icelandic, you do need, or sort of another Nordic language, you need to get it translated. And so that is right here in terms of the criminal record. The one thing is Iceland has fairly good healthcare, but because you would be not into the system for 6 months, they do require you to purchase medical coverage that's valid for 6 months prior to coming and prove that you have that. There's a lot of different insurance companies inside of Iceland that offer this, and I believe when I got it, I think it was around 15,000 kroner, which I think someone was saying it was around $100 or 100 euros or $120 US. So it's not too expensive, especially if you're going to be moving here. You're going to be spending a couple $100 on all this stuff to fill out all the information. So the medical coverage is important. So the application for the work permit, again, this is the residence permit. So we're going to have to go through a different application. The employment contract, and that's from your employer. So someone who's going to be hiring you to come and work in Iceland, they'll just have some formal contract that states the dates. And if it's an unlimited contract with no end date, then that'll be stipulated in that. And then, of course, signing the application. So those are all the things that you need just for the residence permit. And we're only on step 2. But we did cover a lot of the other stuff that they list here. One thing that we didn't cover was this application for the appropriate work permit. And this here, depending on the category that you're going to be going for, is just click on the PDF and the application for that. Let's take a look at the permit for work requiring expert knowledge. Whoops. Actually, let me open this up in a new tab so that we stay everything here. So this is where it starts getting really tricky, because the work permits have not entirely been translated, and it looks really intimidating. You can see that there is English on a lot of the fields, and that's fine, but there is also the Icelandic name. And so if someone's helping you with this, then it helps if they perhaps just know Icelandic better to do it that way. Passports that have been sprayed, I mean, I'm not sure what to do in that particular case, because they just won't issue a visa or work permit without having information on your passport. So the limited work permit, again, this is the one that I did. It's a lot of the same information that you've already would have filled out on the residence permit. So that's why at the beginning of the video I was saying it's unfortunate that you need to fill out 2 different applications. But I guess some people might come here for a residence permit, but perhaps not work. The only case that might be valid would be the student. But usually for the residence permit, you just have to fill out both if you want to come here and work. So again, all the information, email, phone number, your address, the insurance company that you have, etc. The information about the employer that's going to be hiring you. So the name of the company, their ID number, and then all the information for them. And then the reason that they are hiring you. And that would just be, they'll write something in there, probably just like, oh, we can't find someone qualified within Iceland or Europe, or this person has special skills, etc. So usually your employer will help you fill out this form just because it pertains to them. Again, you're going to have to fill in all of your educational background, and that's from elementary school, secondary school or high school, university, etc. Languages, and then record of employment. So everywhere that you've worked, it doesn't have a date, but they have 3 fields. If you've had the same job for a couple of years, that's perfect. If you're jumping job to job and you've had 10 jobs in the last 2 years, it might be a little bit harder to fill this out. So, but 3 is usually enough, and it just lets you know what they have. They do need, again, this is where it gets very, very difficult, and you're probably going to want to get the place that's hiring you to help you out, is they need the opinion of the relevant trade union. A lot of jobs here, and almost everyone in the country, I believe, is protected or involved in a union in some regard. And so there's 2 big unions here, which is Epling and VR. Now, I'm a member of VR just based on the type of work I was in, and they deal mostly with any of the computer science, that sort of stuff. VR has a lot of people in that. And then Epling has a lot of stuff in education, and healthcare, I believe, is in Epling. So there's 2 different unions. The point is the employer will have to go to one of those unions that has the majority of the people in that union and get their input on your application. So everything could be perfect, but if the trade union's like, you know what, we have a lot of people that are waiting for this job, I don't approve of this, they're going to write in this area. What you want is just them to be like, yep, this all sounds good, and then they'll stamp it with their union stamp. Spouse or cohabitation partner, you can put all that stuff in there. Information about your children, and then just signing it. There's information down here at the bottom, which goes into a little bit more of the legality and the details of it. But again, this one here is all in Icelandic, so it is difficult to do this on your own. You can use Google Translate, which works pretty good to get the gist of it. So you can see, we can copy this and just go into Google Translate and paste it in. And then you can get an idea of all the information that's coming in. For me, I like to know exactly what's on all of the documents I'm signing, which is probably a good thing to do. So use Google Translate. It's fairly good at reading Icelandic and translating it into English or whatever other language that you might need. And again, goes through all of the information that's there. So it's really, really useful to do that. So those are the two applications that you need to fill out. Is, as I said, this one in blue is the residence permit based on work. And then this one here is the work permit. So you'll be basically the same information on both and submitting them as a package here. And then of course the employment contract, which they have an example, but it doesn't have to be exactly this one. I myself have just used the employment contract that they provide here. I just asked my work to fill out this information as well, because I mean, if it's from them, I just want it to be sort of the safest bet was just using the stuff that they had provided in terms of the applications. And it's just stuff about the job description, how much you're working, how much you're making, and things like that. So they'll just fill this out, the contract of employment, and then they have like the same form a bunch of times. And then also, instructions at the bottom for filling out the contract of employment for foreign employees. So lots of information here, and they have some of the legislation built in. So that's all the stuff for basically coming here to work. The renewal process is almost the exact same. There's just less information that you need. For when you're renewing, you don't need things like the criminal record certificate anymore, but you still need to fill out the residence and work permits to make sure that you still have like a valid job and that people still want you. The weird thing is that even if you have a job, a solid job, and you've been working there, technically you could submit all the information and then they can deny you the renewal for whatever reason. But I've never heard of that happening. If you have the job and you're submitting to have a renewal of your residence and work visas and permits, most likely it's just going to pass. But it's always stressful going through this process. For students, in terms of what you need, a lot of the stuff is the exact same. So won't go through all of it again. But you do need the payment, you need the residence permit, you need the photocopies of the passport photos and all that. You need the admission certificate or acceptance letter. And the amount of study is you have to be full-time student. So you can't come here as part-time, unfortunately. And then the post-grad doctorate programs from foreign universities collaborating, as again, there's different visas that you can go through. But you do need, again, confirmation between your foreign university and the Icelandic university. Same with exchange students. If you're in secondary school or high school, that's one option. But again, your schools need to work together and sort of confirm that this is something that's going to be happening. The criminal record certificate, of course, translation of all this stuff, the health insurance, and then the documents on support is very important for this type of visa and any other visa that's not pertaining to some sort of work permit. So let's take a look at the basic requirements, because that's the support that you would need. So the basic requirements for all permits, even if it's a work permit, but as I said, the work permit, they're just assuming that you're going to be going through all of this anyway. So the amount of support that you need for an individual is 709 Icelandic kroner per month. And if we look at, let's see, actually we'll do ISK to euro. I don't really know the euro as much as some people in terms of the Icelandic kroner. Oh, of course, it doesn't translate automatically. So we'll just go here. So 207,709. So you need per month 1,386 euros in the bank. What that means is you need to be able to show that you have enough support for 1 year. So it's not enough to just say, oh yeah, I have, the amount 207,000 Icelandic in my bank, or let's see what it is in US dollars, $1,600 US in the bank. You need to have that times 12 to prove that you have a year's worth of support ready to go. So again, if you're an individual, it's quite a bit. If you're a couple, you need to show a little bit more. It's not double. And then if you have any additional support that you need for family members that are 18 or younger, such as kids, you need to add 104,000 Icelandic kroner more for each person per month. So it's quite a bit of money that you need in order to come here and save up. And again, you need to show that you have secure support for 1 year. If you're getting a job here, odds are that's enough, which is why they don't list it. Any job here, even at minimum wage, I believe, will provide more than this amount. And then the people here who don't need to provide independent support, it just sort of goes through all of this. In terms of how you show that you have this much money, there's the employment contract, which is what we looked at just a second ago. And then we have pay slips for the last 3 months. So if you have a job that you've been working at for the last 3 months, you can show that you have some money there. And sufficient own money is probably, if you're a student, you're going to be using this particular avenue, which is the bank account balance for Iceland, in Iceland or abroad. So you just print out your bank balance and say, hey, I have a year's worth of cash, 10 grand, 15 grand US or however much it was in the bank and ready to go. And then of course, study loans and study grants. They also go into what's not considered satisfactory support. So you can't just say, oh, I have all these credit cards that I can use. I mean, that's just not something they want to see actual cash. And then the health insurance, criminal record certificate, it just goes more and more on this sort of stuff. The weird thing in terms of the permits is that you need to have somewhere to live before you can actually fill out all of this information. So you can see here that before a residence permit is issued, the applicant's domicile must be registered with Registers Iceland. And if you did not state your place of residence in the application, you need to fill out a form before they can issue a card. And this form is not found. But basically, they want to know where in Iceland you're going to live, which is a bit difficult because it could take 6 months and maybe you don't have student housing, etc. So that's the permits for students. Now, is my mic only on the left ear? Yeah. Let me see here. Thank you for letting me know. Let's see if I can fix this. There we go. That should be much better. It's technology, right? But thank you for letting me know. If you are refused, or if you are refused, then you can appeal their decision, as with a lot of other things. And this, I think, especially comes into the asylum seekers, because you can go to the Immigration and Asylum Appeals Board, But if we were looking at someone that was saying that they wanted to come here and work for quite a while. So if we go back to the home, they've recently switched it so that you can stay here and work. And let me just see. Here we go. So if someone is working for themselves, or you have a job where you can work from home, and I think a lot of people are working from home these days, you can go through this process, which is the long-term visa for remote workers and all your family members. The basic issuing guidelines are listed here at the top, is that you don't need a visa to travel to Iceland. The amount of money that you need to show in terms of monthly income, and I said this earlier, it's quite a bit. So it's between 1 million to 1.3 million Icelandic. And I don't know where everyone is that's watching this, but if we're looking at the US dollar, so that means per month, you need to be making let's switch this to get this going. $7,800 US from your job. So it's quite a bit. And then if you're looking at euro per month from your job, if you want to be here working remotely, is 6,675 euros. So it's really, really high. I mean, I think everyone can claim to be, do asylum seeker. It's a matter of if it gets approved or not. Now, Iceland doesn't have the best reputation for granting asylum, because people coming from other countries, there's been a lot in the news that they're sending people back to Sweden or Norway or whatever country they first came from to get to Iceland, because there's a lot of the places that asylum seekers are coming from, there's no direct flight to Iceland from there. So yeah. But anyway, so back to the amount of money, it's quite a bit of money that you do need in order to be a remote worker, and that's a minimum. So it's a lot of money. Yeah, that's basically it. And you can just come here and you can work for up to, I believe, 1 year. Yeah, up to 12 months, and just sort of relax here. If you don't plan on living here, permanently, I would say that maybe the 90 days is enough. You can come here during the summer where it's really nice, go back home for a few months, and then come back for perhaps the Northern Lights season. But I mean, if you're going to work in the countryside and just sort of relax, maybe that's something that you just do the 1 year remote work. So in terms of who can be issued for a long-term remote work visa, is any foreigner who wants to work remotely from Iceland, who's employee of a foreign company. And then if you're a self-employed, you can do that. Okay. And as I said, it's up to 1 year. So that's the information for that. And then the information that you need is just sort of, again, making sure that you pay UTL, the immigration office, for all their services and processing the application for the long-term visa, which we'll just quickly take a look at. Again, it's a lot of the same information that we've looked at earlier. So purpose of working remotely from Iceland, or if you have a spouse or cohabiting partner and a child and so forth. So you just, again, name, email, where you've lived, passport information, and previous stays, criminal record, etc. So it's a lot of the same information. A little bit less than if you're doing some of the other residence permits, but again, we've sort of been through this before. And then, of course, copies of the passport, the health insurance, why you're coming to Iceland, and then the income showing that you have the support, and the criminal record check, and then just the other information that you might need. So there's a lot of information there. One thing that I think a lot of people always wonder is when you're filling out these forms and you want to switch jobs how long or what's the process before you can just stay here. And that's a permanent visa. So if we look at that, back to the residence permit. Now, a lot of these, as I said, the student and the specialist work permits and residence permits are all okay to be used in terms of the time towards what's needed for a permanent residence permit. So we'll look at that. And this is basically where you probably want to get to. Again, it takes 4 years of working at the same job. And you can see here that these are the different types of residence permits that may be the basis for a permanent residence permit. And the one that I went through all of this process is the permit based on work requiring expert knowledge. But a lot of these other ones, including the students with limitations, works for this as well. So you have to have sort of a double step process in terms of coming into the citizenship. The biggest thing here is not only have you been here for more than 4 years and you've been making money and being lawful and being a good, citizen in Iceland, I guess, but you do need to have attended 150 hours or more of Icelandic language classes. It's pretty easy to do. I mean, when I first got here, I moved here in January, as I said, and by February, I was taking my first Icelandic class. I wanted to get right away, try and learn as much Icelandic as possible. And I thought that I would be speaking Icelandic within 6 to 8 months. I only know English. I know a lot of Icelandic now, but it has taken considerably more amount of time than I thought it was going to take to learn Icelandic. So 150 hours. You won't be speaking Icelandic, but you'll know enough, and you just go through some of the courses they have here. Or if you're a student, you can learn different university level programs in terms of learning Icelandic or Icelandic as a second language. I think bachelor's degree. Those count towards these hours as well. So again, 4 years, a bunch of Icelandic language classes, and then proving that you have the money still coming in and that you have your job. There's a couple things that you can't have done. You can't have gone through any welfare or financial assistance by the municipality that you're in Iceland. You can't be in trouble with the police or the courts. So it's things like unpaid speeding tickets, if you have that, or something worse. And then, basically nothing to do with criminal records or anything like that. Nothing to do with breaking the law. Having good job, decent salary, and having gone Icelandic language class, and then you could submit this application for permanent residence permit. Now, the big difference between this permit and the previous one is you don't need to renew all the time. So that's number one. That's really takes the stress away, not having to renew every year. But it also allows you to work different jobs and not have to go and notify or resubmit another work permit to change jobs. So for me, again, I was at the same job for over 4 years, and then I wanted to do some freelance work, but I wasn't able to do that here in Iceland until after the 4 years was up. So I couldn't work for more than one employer, and the employer that I had to work for 4 years was the one that I moved here for. After the 4 years, then I'm able to do what I want. I can do freelance. I can work at this company. I can go work at a bar if I want. All of this stuff, and then you can bring your family and stuff like that. With the permanent residence permit, you can stay abroad outside of Iceland for up to 18 months over 4 years without it becoming invalid. You can apply to have exceptions to this rule, but they're saying that, again, if you're looking to get citizenship, be sure to stay within this 18 months over a 4-year period. And then just more and more details on what's actually required here. So again, they're saying that the time requirements, 4 years, based on some of the various residence permits and work permits that you have, the language study. There are exceptions to this, and it's very important to note that if you're older than 65 and you've lived in Iceland for the past 7 years, then you don't need to go and take an Icelandic class. If you have any physical or mental reasons why you can't attend a course in Icelandic language, they let you, again, not, you can be exempted from this. And then, as I stated earlier, if you have documents that state that you're learning or studying Icelandic language in primary, secondary, or at the university level, then again, you don't need to go to the classes. But I think the classes are a great way, especially if you're new, to meet new people. So I would say that it's very important to go, as well as the unions here cover, I think it's 85 or 90% of the cost of the course, of the language course. So it's definitely something to just go ahead and do. Again, the means of support, and then the application process, which is very much the same thing. If we look at let me just close some of these other tabs I got open so that I'm not sort of all over the place. If we look at the application for the permanent residence permit, it's basically the exact same as we've looked at previously. All your information, children, spouse, cohabiting partner, your parents, all your school stuff, just all of the exact same things, just an updated version. So that's it for the permanent. Then you submit that and just wait and hope that they just issue it if this is your goal. Now the processing time, we can see here on their website, the permanent residence permits as of right now, which is March 26th, they're looking at all of the applications that have come in October. So what I would recommend with any permits is apply much earlier and keep these sort of times that it takes for them to go through it, that you are submitting it with enough time before your initial permits run out, because you don't want to be in a situation where you don't have a visa and you don't have a work permit and they haven't approved your other one yet. You can see here, as I said, Icelandic citizenship, they're looking at here 2020. I have a friend who submitted his in October of 2019 and they are still looking through it. So it's a huge amount of time that they take going through this. So that's an important thing. And if we go back home, there's again the asylum protection if you want to go through that. And then the citizenship, which if you're watching this video, most likely you're not ready for the citizenship one, but you can see here citizenship for adults, and there's a lot of information here, but most of the information is going to be pertaining to people who are already in Iceland, so that you need to get stuff from the city and from the tax agencies here in Iceland and so forth. So I'm not going to go into this because that's what we need. And then all the news they have here down at the bottom. So it's an important thing. Now, another thing that's really kind of annoying for me when dealing, the people that have worked here, I've always had kind of a pleasant experience. It hasn't been bad. I mean, it's just a government agency. But the thing for me that is really annoying is the hours that they're open is Monday to Thursdays, 9 to 2, and then Fridays from 9 to 12. So it's very, very difficult. And there's long waits if you go down there, especially when you're emailing them or trying to call them. It's a hard organization to get information from. If you do email them, you can email them with any questions that you have, but it takes up to, I think, 10 business days before they're saying that they're going to reply. So it does take a while. But it's a lot of forms, but the process is not in itself too difficult to move here. The hardest part is finding a company that wants to hire you. Again, this is all if you're outside of Europe. If you're in Europe, guess what? You can just fly here and just move here. You don't have to do anything. You just show up, you go to the office and you just say, hey, I'm from Sweden or Norway. I would like to get an ID number and I'm going to start working. So you don't need work permits and things like that if you're coming from within Europe because of the free movement of European citizens. Those of us from outside of Europe need to go through this process, and it's lengthy. So if we're thinking, how do we get a job in Iceland? There is a website, alfred.is, which is basically the go-to place for getting jobs. If you're in the tech industry, there's another site, which is tvinna.is. And between these two sites is all of the job postings that you're gonna want. If you're in the healthcare sector, Alfred will be the go-to. And what we can do is very, very recently, Alfred actually changed their site so that you can go and switch it to English. Most of the stuff here is going to be in Icelandic, sorry. What we can do is you can translate it. So I have in my browser, I have Google Translate extension built in, which helps me because I can just translate to English. And then you can see all of the different jobs that are here for, the various companies in Iceland. If we're looking down here, I know someone was talking about the healthcare sector. You can see here, there's Red Cross, there's healthcare, home nursing, general employee in the home care. There's a lot of, not right now, we're not seeing a lot of healthcare jobs. But scrolling through, you can see there's quite a lot of open positions. There's a nurse wanted over this one here, and so forth. So it's something to sort of keep in mind. One thing though is if we just pick, a random one like marketing, digital media, or we look at DevOps specialists, so in computer science, and then if we take one more and we look at something in, say, the healthcare, and let's find where that nurse one was. So the nurse one. So if we're looking at these, again, everything is posted in Icelandic for the most part. There are a few companies that post in English, and those will be companies that are much larger, like the gaming company, CCP. They usually post all their stuff in English. And Mara, which is another big company here, they, I believe, post most of their jobs in English. So again, much like what we did on the last page, I usually translate this to English, and then that way you can see all of the information that's needed. A lot of the jobs, and this one doesn't say it, but a lot of the jobs will specifically state, here it is, that you need Icelandic language. Basically, they are looking for people who can speak fluently in Icelandic. In the computer science sector, this is less important. It's funny that I say it's less important, but then in this DevOps, they want Icelandic speakers as well. But for the most part, all of the computer science jobs that I've seen, they don't mind if you don't speak Icelandic because you can still do your job. If we're looking at the nurse, this one here, it's the funny thing is like they want a nurse, but they don't have a lot of information. It's funny that the computer science stuff has more detail than the nursing one. So the big thing is that they want the right to work as a nurse in Iceland, and you'll have to go through the national hospital, I believe, to get any credentials that you have in the medical field certified, and that will give you the right to work here. So very important stuff there. So these are the biggest job ones. If we look back at the other site, which again is geared more towards the technical industry and the computer sciences and so forth, You can see some of them are listed in English, but even if we click on here, perhaps, yeah, so you can see this particular company is a very large company here. This is posting in English, and Icelandic is a plus. So they do need a lot of people if you know a lot of web technologies, say the front-end developers here. Most of these, if we just translate so that you can see all of them, most of them are programming jobs. And you can see here, programming, interface, engineers, designers. That's what this website is all about. So take a look here if you are in that field and you want to move to Iceland. So we can see here, a big thing in Iceland right now in terms of the web field, I believe it's Node. So we can see if it actually states, no, see this one here, front-end developer doesn't even state that what technologies they want, but basically just want to be up to date with the latest web design trends. Yeah, here we go. So this one here, they want someone with experience using Vue.js or another modern end framework. So again, there's tons of these jobs. Don't need to go into all of them, but definitely check these sites out if you're looking into it. There's a lot of information covered. So yeah, I mean, I think I've covered pretty much everything. Again, if you're from within Europe, you don't have to go through all of these hoops. You can go just straight, just jump on a plane and come here. The nice thing, I guess the one thing I would recommend if you do want to move to Iceland is 100% come and visit before you sort of pull the trigger and move, because you may find that although you really like it for a week or 2 weeks, a longer stay might not be for you. It can be very isolating here, and if that's your style, then perfect. But there's some winters where it's just super windy and super raining and snowing and ice, and you're just stuck inside for 3 weeks because there's no point in going out. For me, I fell in love with the summers. That's why I stay here. And I can't get enough of all like day and night sun, like the sun never setting. That's for me. But yeah, I mean, that's everything. I hope everyone enjoyed this. It's one of those things that when I was doing it over 5 years ago, or I guess it was almost 6 years now, that it's very intimidating. And there's a lot of people posting out there on how to do it, but less so in terms of the actual things. Yeah, well, the funny thing is, like, I'm actually from Canada, so that's where I came from. Here, the nice thing is, in terms of Canada, it doesn't get as cold here as it does in Canada. So that's the one thing that I have going for me, is that -5 here or -10 would be like a really, really cold day, whereas in parts of Canada, or like as most of Canada, we've experienced -20 and a lot more snow in Canada than here. Yeah, well, the funny thing about Iceland is there's a lot of people from Iceland, I think it was at the turn of the century, moved to Canada, and they're in Gimli, Manitoba, which I don't know why they would go to that. No offense to Manitoba and Gimli, but if it's anything like Winnipeg, it's absolutely freezing. I don't know why they would go there. So that's it. There's not many people in Iceland in terms of why it costs so much and why they want so much money in terms of support. Is things are expensive here. They are more expensive. Maybe I'll do a different video, but as sort of general, sort of what things cost. Apartments are going to be. Let's just pull up some ISK to USD. So in terms of apartments, if you want a 1-bedroom apartment, my guess is that the minimum that you'd be looking at was around 170,000 Icelandic kroner. So it's around $1,300 US. If you need a 2-bedroom or more, then you're looking at a minimum of probably around 220,000 Icelandic kroner. So that's around $1,700 US. Studio apartments, you can get down as low as, I think is around 130,000 if you're lucky. So it's around $1,000 a month in the States, and that doesn't include obviously the food and entertainment and anything else that you want. Things like hamburgers and stuff like that are fairly expensive. You're looking at probably a minimum of 3,000 Icelandic, so it's around $20 to $30 US. And then for me, I mean, coming from a country where we do tipping and we have tax not included in the price, things like beers they're expensive here, but they're not as expensive as someone might think, especially if you're from the States or some other European countries. But for me, coming from Canada, if you go to a bar and you get a pint of beer, and by the time the tax and the tip and everything is in, maybe it's like $8 or $9 for a drink, depending on where you go. So here, if you're going on happy hour, which I 100% recommend to get, there's apps out there for happy hour, but you can get drinks as low as around 700 kroner for a beer, and that's around $5, $6 US. That's one thing that I'm looking at maybe doing is just going to the store or just showing the prices of different things at the supermarkets, because a lot of people talk about how expensive it is here. And there are some things that are very, very expensive, but then there are some things that are surprisingly much cheaper, especially than compared to Canada. Like the one thing that I think is really funny is that in Canada, Doritos are like $2.99 or $3.99 Canadian for a bag of Doritos. And then here it's like, 199 kroner, like $1.50 for a bag of Doritos, which is it's very strange to me that that's one of the things that would be cheaper here. They do have a lot of their own beers. In fact, that's the one thing I really like about this country is there's a lot of small breweries. They're currently passing, this is a little bit outside the topic, but it's like as a Q&A time. They're currently looking to pass a new law which would allow all of these microbreweries to sell their own beer at the location that they make them. Currently, it's a state liquor store. So you have to go to what they call it Vindbuden. So it's the alcohol store, and that's where you would buy the beer. And the unfortunate thing is there's a lot of places that don't sell their type of beer or their brand of beer that they're making in the actual stores. So they're just limited to bars and restaurants that they sell a keg to or so forth. So there are beers that I've had up in, say, Husavik, when I went to a spa there, this sort of geothermal pool, and I had a fantastic beer from a producer up in Husavik, but I can't actually get their beer without going all the way back to the north and going to the spa or finding somewhere that actually, sells it on tap here in the country. The good news, again, there are a lot of bars here that sell various brands of beer and these microbreweries, and there's a few breweries that have set up their own sort of mini bar. And so there's one that's Reykjavik Brewery, and they're fantastic. I absolutely really love that place. And in addition to the brewery that they have a little bar area, so they're able to sell beer, and they sell obviously their own beer. There's a bunch of places like that do that. Kaldi is another one downtown, and then so there's a lot of option. IPAs are kind of Icelandic's thing, but they're getting more and more into sour beers as well. So it's exciting thing. Obviously, there's no Icelandic wines that I'm aware of, so I don't know how that would taste. But yeah, I mean, it's a great place to go to test out the drinks. And of course, they have Brennivin and all these other schnapps type things and licorice drinks. I wanted to do a video based on tasting all of the different types of licorice drinks, because there are so many, and seeing which one's the best. Because for me, I've tasted them a few times and they all taste very similar. But yeah. Yeah, so far so good. I mean, the nice thing, I think I got lucky in terms of this sort of pandemic living here. Although everything's closed, we've gotten off pretty safe for the most part. I'm not trapped inside, but Yeah, like Denmark, I've only been to Copenhagen once, and unfortunately it was for work, so I didn't have a chance to go out and really explore the nightlife. But I saw there were some signs that like the beers were like really, really cheap, which I'm a bit jealous for anyone that's living in Denmark. You can, I don't know what the wages are in Denmark, so maybe it's sort of in line with how you get paid. But yeah, I mean, if you want to, Iceland is one of those drinking countries. I think the weirdest thing for me when I moved here was, I mean, it's not right now, but normally the bars are open till like 4:30 in the morning, and in Canada the last call for the bars is like 1:30, and you're out by 2. Here, people are drinking. You leave the bar around 4:30 in the morning. People don't get to the bars until like midnight, 1 o'clock. That's kind of the cool time to go. And then even after 4:30, you're still like kind of drinking in the streets and you're partying. It's tiring, but it's quite the experience. So, yeah, I think that's going to be about it. Unless there's more questions. This is it went on a little bit longer than I thought. I thought it would be faster to go through everything, but I'll do Quebec is different. Quebec's kind of like its own thing. But yeah, so I'll do more of these types of videos. I mean, the nice thing is, even when I record them, you guys have questions, I can answer them, and then people afterwards can watch the replay and take a look. But hopefully it gave you a bit of an insight on how to move there. If you have more questions, I mean, you can put stuff in the comments, and I'll be sure to read those. And I will think of doing more videos like this if people like them. So that's it. Thanks so much for watching and I guess listening as well. And I guess until next time, any more questions, just put in the comments. Thanks.